Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the CFA Society Switzerland's webinar on a strategic perspective on career management in times of uncertainty. The technical instruction during the webinar, everyone is muted, but you can use the Q&A. You find the little comment and ask questions. You can also vote for your favorite questions. And during this webinar, we will be asking questions throughout the presentation. So if you see something that's interesting or uncertain to you, please ask the question and we'll address it immediately. Especially during these challenging times, it's important to review critical career strategy factors such as keeping your skills and your network up to date. Today, Peter Zurcher and Jörg Brazel bring their wealth of knowledge of the Swiss employment market and insights into the current trends. Welcome, Peter and Jörg.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You can take you can take now the screen.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yes, looks good.
Well, welcome and yeah, happy for having us. The agenda is a quick introduction who we are. Jörg and myself, we'd like to give you some insights about the Swiss job market, some facts and figures, but most importantly, we'd like to assist you with or help you with your networking skills and talk about the so-called hidden job market. As Sheila mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end. If you have questions pressing during the presentation, please raise them. Sheila will ask us to answer these questions. If we come to these questions during the presentation, we might put them a little bit back, but otherwise we try to answer them. Let me introduce myself quickly. As you see, Peter Zurcher, I am from Zurich, so that's not a joke. Jörg and myself, we are job market experts with von Rundstedt. Very short, we both have a financial background. I have myself 20 years of experience in wealth and asset management. And since 5 years, I'm advising and giving feedback to our clients at von Rundstedt regarding the market. A short explanation at the beginning. When we talk about clients, clients means these are people made redundant in using our services. When we talk about customers during our presentation, these are corporates, companies sponsoring an outplacement for their employees. I'd like to give Jörg the slides just to quickly introduce yourself, and then we come to the especially Swiss banking job market. Jörg?
Thank you, Peter. From my side, well, as Peter already mentioned, I'm also a job market expert at von Rundstedt, supporting clients who are in a career transition. I'm specialized in financial services, especially banking and asset management, officially based in Geneva. So I'm mainly covering the Suisse romande, but also the Ticino market. From my background, I'm an economist by training. I spent 20 years in private banking and asset management. Then 6 years ago, I started my own business as a management consultant, working in the banking sector and in parallel as a specialist for banking with von Rundstedt. What I would like to start with is to give you a quick overview. We did an in-depth analysis of the Swiss banking job market back in December last year, December 2019. Now I know, obviously, that's not the current market, but I think it's still worth having a look because it reveals some of the underlying trends that you really see on the Swiss banking job market. We analyzed back in December all the job vacancies on the open market, about 302,000 job vacancies on the Swiss banking market. And what we found, not very surprisingly to most of us, the most sought after searched roles were client relationship manager roles, 24% of all open jobs advertised. That is client relationship manager roles in private banking. And as you know, that usually means you have to bring an existing portfolio of clients or a very, very convincing business plan. but it's also client relationship manager roles in retail banking as well as commercial banking. Then maybe a bit more surprising, and that's really a development we've seen over a couple of years now, the second position is already IT and IT business analysis, so all the IT related roles. And that's only the roles directly at banks. So that doesn't include all the IT activities that banks have outsourced to external providers. So basically, if you add these external activities, IT roles are already the most important ones on the Swiss banking employment market. And what you see here is a real change in, let's say, a shift in paradigm. Obviously, automation and digitalization of banking processes is nothing new. We've seen that for a long time. But what is really changing today, and you start to see it more and more, is we're not longer focusing only on automating and digitalizing certain processes, but we really talk about the entire value chains. We really talk about moving to new digital products and business models. Then in third place, not very surprisingly, again, you have all the regulatory roles, legal, compliance, and risk management with about 10%. Then, obviously of particular interest, probably to yourselves, portfolio management and investment advice is at about 8% of the total market. Now, maybe a few words about the current situation. Given obviously the corona crisis, this external shock. I don't have the detailed figures, but my perception, I look at the job market every morning. You guys probably look at, I don't know, financial markets in Asia and then think about how Europe is gonna open. I look at the job market in the morning, how many jobs, what kind of jobs are advertised on the Swiss banking market. Due to the crisis, we currently see a significant reduction in jobs being advertised on the open market. If we go a bit more in detail, I still see a lot of client relationship manager positions. I mean, the revenue generating positions, so they're still very much sought after. We continue to see a lot of IT business roles. Regulatory is the same because a lot of these functions are mandatory. You need them even if business is not going great. On a more qualitative note, I've talked to a number of people in HR, in recruitment. What I hear currently is that, yes, there's less open positions on the market. In some cases, job vacancies are simply on hold. And going forward, we'll see if they will be reopened for applications or not. In other cases, I've had a lot of feedback that the recruitment processes take more time. So there's less of a hurry to come to a final decision. At the same time, I think it's important to keep in mind that contrary to other industries, during this crisis, financial service activities have continued. People have been quite busy organizing themselves in the home office and so on. But we obviously now have really two developments in parallel. We have this external shock due to the corona crisis, and we still have obviously the underlying developments, consolidation developments on the Swiss market. I'm happy to go into more details afterwards.
Let me share you some facts and figures about the Swiss job markets. Our figures are based on 1,500 roughly employees impacted by redundancy last year and about 200 companies from various industries. So you see the industry background, you see them here. So banking, insurance, about a quarter, manufacturing, etc. It's also over all areas of functions. And the reason for termination obviously is mostly reorganization and staffing cuts or also cost reductions. What we found is that the length of the job search for laid-off workers increased on average. So on average, it's about 5.6 months for a job search. So prepare yourself. If you start looking for a job, it takes about half a year. Obviously, for younger workers, it's less, and it even is lesser than in the past. So we have this study since 2016. On the other hand, the search duration for older workers has increased significantly. So the age group of 40 to 50 is now about 5.8 months, and the average for over 50s is almost 8 months. We talk in our business with about the degree of difficulty. So we talk about easy profiles, moderate profiles, and challenging profiles. It doesn't mean that someone above 50 is a challenging profile. So one criteria, of course, is age, but one important criteria is also the years of service. So if someone is like 40, but 20 years in the same company, he is definitely a moderate or a challenging profile. And of course, people over 55 with jobs maybe not existing anymore, there you see it takes them almost a year to secure a new job.
Just a question, what are the qualities of an easy profile?
I would say, for example, if you have a financial accountant, 34 years old with a certification, probably he's even headhunted. So an easy profile is someone who's really looked after. Jörg mentioned, for example, the client advisors, the relationship managers. I think a relationship manager on the market with about 250 million assets under management, he's quite quickly finding a new job.
Okay, thanks.
What was really surprising for us, we also follow the search channels. And as you can see, job postings used to be in the range of about 20–25%. So how did our clients find a new job? And through job postings, it was until 2018 about a quarter. And last year we saw a significant increase to job posting to about 40%, and the decrease of the personal network or the hidden job market from about 50% to about a third. We see that this shift comes mostly from the law now since 2017 that vacancies have to be advertised. So they have to be advertised publicly. That's one important reason. And another important reason is that due to the digitalization, due to job opportunities to post on LinkedIn, it's very easy nowadays to post a job and it's almost for free. Nevertheless, networking is definitely still very important. So the networking aspect, don't miss that out. What we see is that especially for the age group over 50, it's very difficult to secure a job through job posting because of these automatic tracking systems. They sometimes are eliminated, if I might say so, automatically through an algorithm. Regarding the mobility or the sector mobility, we talk about a zero gap strategy of companies. So they think a profile needs to match exactly 100% their job profile. That a lot of clients had difficulties to move to other industries, where we saw now that that also increased. So a lot of people managed to secure a job outside their old industry. So about half of the job seekers managed to find a job in that area, and that's a significant increase. Almost a third of the job seekers found a job with a new role when reorienting their career. On the other hand, we experienced that it is very difficult to find jobs outside the financial services sector. So industrial companies are very hesitant when it comes to hiring bankers because there are strong prejudices. The saying is, and don't take me wrong, they make a lot of money and they don't work. So it's very important that you have a bridge story, and I come to that later, because just applying with a CV with only banks and financial services institutions on it to an industrial company is almost guaranteed that you get a negative answer.
Peter, just a quick question. What sectors do you see as being easy to move in and out of? Where did you see the change from 25% to 48%? What sectors are going in? Where are people going into sectors versus not?
Obviously, it's easy, for example, for HR people to switch industries because the processes are more or less the same, the regulations are more or less the same. So the adaptation you can make is pretty easy. I think for someone who's specialized in a certain area, so if someone is a financial analyst or an analyst, it's definitely not easy to move into a role of an accountant. So as I said before, we talk about zero gap policies. So if you don't fulfill about 80% of the job profile required, it's very difficult to switch industries. Also the functions, it's very difficult. Probably interesting is also the development of the salaries of people who've been made redundant. So in the past, we saw that normally you had to experience a salary cut when moving to another job. Last year, on the other hand, we saw that a lot of people could manage to get a higher salary. Across all new hires, definitely those who have been headhunted or direct applied for a job. So this makes it clear that in addition to positive growth in the job market last year, the increasing shortage of skilled workers generally has a positive effect on wage development in Switzerland. How that is now impacted during the COVID crisis is hard to predict. However, we note as an exception that especially for the over 50s, it's quite difficult to secure a new job. So most of them had to make compromises on the job, on the salary. Again, as maybe a disappointment for you, we see in the financial sector not exactly the same picture. So we see that people with a long-term service with a certain company, they have to make compromises when moving into other companies or, I mean, even into industries. So as a conclusion, we see, as Jörg mentioned, in the last 6 weeks, less job postings, obviously. The obligation to notify vacancies lead to the increase of job postings last year. These ATS, so the application tracking systems, are definitely not favorable for people over 50. We definitely also see that continuous training and development is very important. US CFA certified applicants you have an advantage, of course, because the CFA is very well known and looked after, but don't forget to invest in further development. And as I said, it's very difficult to find a job outside the finance industry. If you would like to move industries, you have to network, and I come to that later on. And yeah, you have
Peter,
to
maybe if I may just underscore the point you mentioned about the continuous training. I often get the question from people who are in banking, in a very interesting position, but they say, well, it's difficult to see what's going to happen over not only the short term, but the medium term, given consolidation in the industry, maybe a bit afraid they could at some point lose their job. And the question is, what can I do today to at least prepare as best as possible? And I think there's really two important things you can do. The first one is really, as we've mentioned now several times, is networking. It's networking, networking, networking. It's so important that you develop your network, that you take care of your network, that you expand your network, so that in case you should be at one point in the situation where you need to find a new job, that you can really rely on your network, which you will have developed until then. And the second recommendation is really about training. There's nothing more important than continuous training, than lifelong learning. Obviously, I think talking to you with your CFA certification, that's extremely important on the market. But with every certification and every also university diploma, the half-life of specialist experience is decreasing. So it's important to continuously invest in your training. It's so difficult. I sometimes have clients who spend 25 years in very senior positions in a bank, and they now have to find a new job on the market. I go through the CV and I see, well, the last time they really obtained a certification or training was 25 years ago when they graduated from university. That's a very difficult situation. So it's really important to continuously invest internally, but also externally in such training.
Could I ask a question just on the last slide? The application tracking systems, you say age is one of the characteristics that they're tracking. Is it just a matter of what qualities they're looking for in the job description and to what extent that is matched by the CV, or are there other specific categories that are being highlighted?
It's very difficult to find an answer because we cannot look behind the curtain of this ATS. We assume that age is definitely one topic. We also assume that length of service in a certain company might be an issue. What Jörg mentioned, the qualifications, the certifications. What we see is that anytime you have to go to an application system, the chances for someone who's not 100% match on the profile are limited.
Basically, what you often see as soon as a job is advertised publicly on the website of a bank or on a job board, usually these companies get literally hundreds of applications. So in the first step, in the first selection, they really focus on the CVs, which are 90% or more in line and a match with exactly what they're looking for. So in the end, it can be a small difference, which makes that you're not on the long list. That's the big difference between applying for jobs which are advertised, which are on the open market, as opposed to using your network where you can really talk one-to-one to a hiring manager or to a line manager and really explain what you could bring into this job, even though you may not have exactly the background they're looking for. You might come from a different industry, which is almost impossible if you just apply for an open position which you find on the website of a company.
Just a follow-up question. You mentioned that if you've stayed in one company for a long time, that actually counts against you. Because I've also heard that if you change jobs every year, that's a negative signal too. What would you say is the optimal of tenure?
I mean, we see everything, you know. I mean, we see companies where you change like every 3 years. They like that because then you're very agile, you are flexible, you're adaptable to new situations. We see other companies, they say, oh, if someone is not have been with a company for 10 years, he's not loyal. We don't like these kind of people. It's what Jörg said. You're always best off when you can talk first to someone from a company, best to your future line manager, hiring manager, someone you know in a company, and then change or adapt your CV a little bit according to their needs. But there's no rule fits all.
It can be a very positive aspect that you spend a long time with the same company. The challenges we often see is that if someone spent a long time at the same company, he started very long ago, he's had several promotions, and especially if you're talking about financial services, he started at a time when market salaries were higher, he went through different promotions, had more salary. And nowadays, the market is maybe a bit different. So he will have to consider maybe even a reduced salary, because his salary is just not in line anymore with what the market currently pays.
In those questions that you mentioned, obviously everyone wants to get the best salary possible. And I think there's been the idea, well, you can ask for a high amount and then you can negotiate down. But it sounds to me as though now, if you ask for a high salary, you're just eliminated. What sort of strategy do you have for mentioning salaries?
I mean, basically, that's normally the first question they ask you when they call you up. I mean, nowadays, if you apply for a position, normally someone calls you up from the company and asks you like 3 questions. What's the reason why you want to change? When are you available? And what is your salary expectation? And a salary expectation is not a wishful thinking. We advise, if you are asked about salary expectation, well, like Jörg said, when you have been 20 years with the same company, I mean, tell them I've been 20 years with company XYZ. I don't know what your policy is. I don't know what the challenges in this role is. But I can tell you what I had as a base salary in my last role. Because in this first call you get, it's only, they would like to see if you are in the bandwidth they have. So if you're in the budget range, if they have a budget of 150 to 160K as a base salary, and you made 250K, you will be obviously out. If you are at 160 and 170, maybe they renegotiate.
Okay, thanks.
But don't come up with fancy ideas about salaries. Stick with the truth.
That's often a good strategy.
So the new normal of the COVID-19, I mean, it will definitely have an impact on business traveling, on presence in meetings and office locations. Home office has proven very reliable. It will be definitely also be requested in the future. On the long run, we hear already comments of companies, it works so well remotely. Do we still need these people in Switzerland? Because we have the highest salaries here and it works so well. So maybe some positions might be at risk in the longer run. As you all know, the decline in assets under management will again lead to more cost-saving initiatives. Cost-saving initiatives normally are redundancies. And the candidates, they need to acquire digital skills. We see more and more companies doing pre-screenings or even whole interview processes virtually, electronically. So you have to familiarize yourself with video interviewing, how you appear in video. You have to train that. So you have to gain also your virtual or improve your virtual networking skills.
Peter, could you just elaborate on the digital skills that are being looked for? That digital skills covers a huge range, you know, from being an ace programmer to knowing how to open an Excel sheet. What exactly are the digital skills you see in demand?
Yeah. What you see, and that's quite interesting, if you look at the developments in the banking environment, basically what is important, the success factors for the whole digital transformation of business models are really 3. You have the technology, so that's more the technical skills. That's often within the IT department. That's about IT skills. It's about the new technologies and so on. But equally important, the second success factor, that's really about the digital business skills. Because technology is a means to achieve certain business objectives. And it's going to be more and more important to have also digital business skills. Understand how digital products work, how you price a digital product, how you transform a business model, how digital ecosystems work, and so on. And you have a third success factor, which is really about people, that is about the change management. Because all these technology changes, they need to be implemented, they need to be accepted by employees as well as clients. So you really need the 3 elements: technology, business model, digital skills, and change management on the people and HR side. And I think that's also, if you look what's happening now in terms of, let's take the big word, digitalization. It's really going from what was in the past, automating and digitalizing certain processes, to really new digital products and business models. Just to mention a few, obviously, think about all these new neobanks, smartphone banks, think about the robo-advisory, think about e-commerce platforms, and most important of all, that's not so much in discussion right now, but I think the biggest strategic challenge to banking will come from the big tech companies. Once they start to really offer financial services, they really have the technology. They have already a huge existing client base. They've developed trust over the years. They're used to rolling out business models globally. So it's important to keep in mind that they could become the most important competitor to the existing banks, to the incumbents.
Do you see any particular tech company taking the lead in that transformation?
Right now, what you see is, I think they have so many other business objectives that financial services is not yet top of their agenda. In part also because financial services is highly regulated. It's very different from one country, one market to another. But at some point, it will certainly become. And you see the first initiatives. Credit cards being launched by tech companies in cooperation with banks, other tech companies, big tech companies in discussion with banks about checking accounts. As you may know, Amazon already has some kind of financial services for product providers on their platform. Uber launched some financial services for the Uber car drivers. So you see in all these tech companies, they start with very simple, basic financial services. And what usually happens, these companies start with very basic services, maybe around the checking account, maybe around payments. And then once you have an account, the account is negative. So you're already talking about the credits, about loans. So it's really starting with very simple financial services and then moving up the value chain to more complex ones.
Thanks.
Well, Sheila, as we mentioned, networking and access to the hidden job market is definitely key. It's definitely key for people which are not 100% match on a job profile. And as you also saw in our statistics, it still counts for more than 30% of successful job searches. Most people have a natural resistance to network. So it's discomfort, it's not sure what to say, it's not sure how to approach others. Always, I don't have time is an excuse. We see a lot of our clients, they start training to network when they are with us. And we really emphasize not to lose these skills over a certain period of time again. Even though it's not easy to mingle amongst people if you're not comfortable, training makes you more comfortable. So it will definitely be a skill you need to acquire for the future. When networking, body language is very important, but also your voice, and especially now when online, virtual, make sure that your voice is clear, make sure that you have a good reception when talking to someone. Nothing more embarrassing if they don't understand you. What we always say, you have these cold and warm calls. And I mean, in the guys of you who are in sales, you know, cold calls, you have to do them. I'm in sales as well, and I honestly, it's not my favorite hobby. So whenever you have the chance to turn a cold call into a warm call, and when I say a warm call, it's easier to approach someone if you know, or if you have someone who can introduce you. So if I want to get in touch with Sheila, and I know Sheila knows Jörg, and if I say, well, Sheila, Jörg gave me your contact details, and I know you know Jörg Brossel from Rundstedt, would you have time for a quick discussion? You're probably more open than when I just call you out of the blue. You don't have any idea who I am. So that's very important. You have to find, we call them your ambassadors. So you have to find people you can use, the other guys trust in. So that's very important. Looking for these ambassadors. Nowadays with LinkedIn, it's pretty easy. So you see who's connected to you, so you see who's connected to someone else. So you might come up with these names. So very important also when doing these calls, make sure before you do the call what you would like to achieve. Make sure you have a pitch. It's not about recitating your CV. So you need to have a pitch, and you need to be prepared that you don't have 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourself. Maybe you have 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 sentences, so someone can remind you. We have nowadays also in COVID times various networking opportunities and occasions. So we have also events, meetings on social media. You can network on LinkedIn, not really Facebook, Instagram when it comes to business. And sometimes we are asked, how often do you network? As often as you can. And you always, as I said before, you have to know what you would like to get out of this occasion. The worst way to approach someone is, hey, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? Normally you get 3 different answers. I'm not responsible. Please talk to HR. That's a dead end normally. And honestly, the worst answer you can get is, well, send me your CV, I'll check. Probably you'll never hear back. So when networking, it's about giving, not receiving. So think if you talk to someone, think if you want to approach someone, what could I give that person? What could be of interest of my knowledge? And start maybe doing a list with things you can offer, things you are good in, things you can give, like giveaways. Because what we say, networking is like a sales process. It's not enough just to approach 2 or 3 people. Approach 10, 12, 15 people, because what you have to learn, you have to be patient. A colleague who sat next to you 5 years ago, maybe you had lunch with him twice a week, you were chit-chatting about your boss. Don't expect that when you approach someone 5 years later, he will immediately jump and like to see you. So you need time to, like in a sales process, you need time to gain trust, and sometimes they don't even get back at the first. So you need to be patient, very important.
What is also very important, if I may interrupt you, Peter, is try to get out of your comfort zone. It's obviously it's much easier to network with people you already know, to talk to former colleagues from work and so on, but try to really go outside your comfort zone. Try to network with people you have never met before. Go to events, use all these networking opportunities to really expand your network beyond the people you already know.
Thank you, Jörg. And maybe what's a way to tackle a network? Do a list of companies you would like to work for. We call this a target list. Then think, who do I know in this company? And maybe don't start with your dream company, with your favorite company. Don't start maybe with the person you think could help you best. As Jörg said, try maybe a guy you can't ruin anything, you can't hurt yourself, because it's all about trial and error. I mean, it's like in sales, sometimes they just hang up, sometimes they're very friendly. you have to, as Jörg said, you have to get out of your comfort zone and you have to try and try and try. So prepare your pitch. So prepare before you talk to someone. What would I like this person to be remembered about? What is my pitch? Prepare also what to ask before you network. Sometimes if you call someone up you've not seen for 5 years, they will ask you, well, happy to meet, but what's it all about? And then when you say, well, I just have to get the coffee with you, and probably he says, not interested. What helps is imagine you will be the other person. So what will be of interest for you to meet someone, to talk to someone? It's definitely not just, let's catch up and have a coffee, because normally you don't have time for that. So think about what to ask. Be sure also to follow up. I mean, the nicest conversations, if you connect to someone on LinkedIn, if you don't follow up, like in a sales process, if you don't follow up, they will forget you. Make also sure that your LinkedIn profile nowadays, especially LinkedIn, is updated, that if someone looks you up, they see what you've done, they see what you're good in, so your message needs to be ready there. And as I said before, think what you can give to your contact, because people, they like to give advice and people like to receive presents. So if you know what to give to your contact, you might be more successful than just asking for help. And finally, think about your own brand. Think about what could be my brand.
I just have a question on the former slide. There seems to be a balancing act between what you give and then being prepared to what to ask. You know, how do you balance the giving and taking or asking?
I would advise that in your first interaction, don't ask. So just give.
And I suppose the thought leadership will lead you to have something to give to someone else. Exactly,
and you have also be prepared to maybe, sometimes I call that to do some pro bono consulting. So maybe you have to ask help someone, give some advice, and you cannot send out an invoice afterwards. But normally if you give, you always will receive in the end. Mm. So I would like to open it up for Q&As if you have.
I think we've had a lot of questions during the process of the presentation, which has been very useful. If anyone does have a question to ask, please use the Q&A symbol. Here we go. What is the best approach to follow up in LinkedIn after you contact the relevant person? What could be the story?
Well, my advice is that if you send out messages on LinkedIn, keep them short and quick, because people don't read, they don't read a novel on LinkedIn. What I normally advise is ask, because on LinkedIn you don't have contact details, so you don't have an email address, you don't have a phone number. So maybe come up with a teaser to the other person, like 1 or 2 lines, and ask for the contact details so you can follow up on the normal channel and not on LinkedIn or on social media.
Here's someone who says, I have no idea what I can give. What could be the strategy?
I'm sure everybody has to give someone something. I'm sure.
Maybe that's the training option. Yes. Get trained to do something, to be able to give something.
I saw a question about compensation trends. I mean, yeah. That's what I said before. I mean, I've seen a lot of people from financial services, and I think there are some, don't want to like to call them usual subjects, but there are some companies that are really on the upper range of compensation. So these people have to be aware that maybe they have to reduce 5 to 10%. There are others which are on average, but I mean, you see the cost pressure will increase. So you have to be aware that you not only get 10% more each time you change.
It did seem in your chart that older workers seem to be the ones who are most focused on getting a cost reduction or a salary reduction. Is that just because they tend to be the more higher paid?
Yes, but I mean, it's also it's no rule. It's not one rule fits all.
Okay. Here's another question on the COVID. You mentioned that certain positions are particularly vulnerable and being questioned. What exactly are those positions? Could you elaborate?
I think everybody who can now work in home office and it works smoothly and without any problems and doesn't need to speak Swiss German is basically at the moment at risk.
That actually is another question. Someone saying, how important is it to be able to speak German to have a career in finance in Switzerland?
If it's I mean, Jörg, I think more than 50% of our clients, they don't speak German at all. So
it really depends upon on the role, upon the bank, and so on. Obviously, if you have a client-facing role in the more on the Swiss German side, talking to clients who speak German, then it's obviously a must. On the other hand, I also know of a number of roles, highly sophisticated roles with banks in Zurich, where the whole team speaks English, where no one really needs German, where it's more a question of, well, if you live in Zurich or close to Zurich, your kids go to school, they will speak German or Swiss German. So it's more a question of your private life and German for that than needing it at the office. But of course, the more client-facing roles you have, the more the language is important, whether that's German, whether that's other languages spoken by your clients. I mean, you have a lot of in private banking teams focused on the Middle East, it's Arabic. You have client teams focused on Latin America, it's Spanish and Portuguese and so on.
I saw an interesting question about pro bono advice for CRM positions. I mean, if you, for example, in your actual position or in recent roles, you introduce CRM models. If you have experience in these topics, I mean, if you know in private banking someone who is facing the same problem, I mean, you can share experiences. You can tell what you've done, how you run the process, how you build the project, how you save costs, various things you can talk about.
There's a kind of two questions. If you're new to the Swiss market, and I suppose this is networking, well, how do you advise to break the ice with the Swiss when you meet people for the first time? Anything particular? If you're German, I don't know if that's relevant, but.
I think it's trying. I mean, how do you break ice with Swiss? I mean, probably a Swiss in Geneva or a Swiss in Zurich is different than a Swiss in Uri or in the Valais region. So, I mean, just be open and don't expect that they invite you for dinner just right after the first meeting.
I think it's, yeah, as you said, it's really about being proactive. It's about reaching out. Using all these opportunities that are offered. There's so many events and you can go to. I mean, just check out everything which is, for example, on Meetup. I mean, where you can really choose between the specific topics which interest you and then go to all these events. Be very open-minded and really try to start from there and build your network.
If you're new to the Swiss, what sort of recommendations, where would you suggest starting to build your network? Any ideas? Maybe the CFA.
For example.
I think, yeah, you have different opportunities. Well, I mentioned just before, there's all these events, more or less public events. You find many of them on Meetup. There's a lot of events, especially in financial services and so on, organized either by the banks directly or by the big four audit companies. Use contacts through the CFA Society and maybe just start with checking out your LinkedIn profile. Maybe you don't have a lot of direct contacts if you're coming from a different country to Switzerland, but you may know people who have contacts in Switzerland. So really use a lot your LinkedIn profile to already check out where you have maybe indirect contacts, someone who knows a lot of people in Switzerland.
I saw a question about being self-employed instead of employment. I mean, what we do in the process when we consult clients at von Rundstedt, we do so-called reality checks. So, I mean, if you do your career assessment and you think I could be self-employed, talk with someone about this idea, try to find out if there is a market. We see a lot of people approaching us with the idea of getting self-employed, where we have to come to the conclusion, well, it's a great idea, but you don't make any money, or you won't find someone who pays for these kind of services. If you try to be self-employed as an independent investment advisor, asset manager, whatever, I mean, maybe check first if you can still keep your customers at the bank you've worked at, if they allow that. We've seen some examples that when someone tried to be self-employed and left the bank didn't accept him as an independent asset manager or as an external asset manager, and come up with a business plan, a realistic business plan, and let it check. Then why not? But you should ask this question before starting to look for a job, and not 6-7 months into the process out of desperation. Oh, I don't find a job, I think I'm going to be self-employed.
Here's another question.
Really start by focusing on what, in this case, if you want to become self-employed, start by focusing on the client, start by focusing on the market. Do you already have potential clients? Which would be the clients? Which are the value propositions that you want to offer? I so often have such an initial discussion, and people start asking me about, yeah, well, what kind of legal setup should I choose? That's probably the easiest question. You can even outsource it to someone else. It's really about what is the business you want to develop? Do you already have clients? Have you already talked to potential clients? Are you already in contact with people who you're pretty sure they would become your first clients? Really start with focusing on this.
Here's a question, not self-employment, but how to break into the Swiss family office sector. Any ideas?
Well, you have to differentiate between the multiple family office and the classical family offices. And the classical family offices, it's normally all about sales as well, even though also with the multi-family offices. So they're not looking for administrative people so much. They're looking really for sales-oriented people. They also need to acquire assets under management. Some of them are really small. Some of them are maybe 5 or 10 people. As Jörg said, check on, I mean, first of all, check names of family offices you come up with. Check if you're connected somehow, and then ask what do they do all day long, and yeah, talk to your network.
I think, if I may add, it's really a very diverse universe. Try to understand, get as much information as possible about your target family offices. Because is it a very big, very important family office where you would also have a lot of investment roles because they maybe manage some asset classes internally? Or is it a smaller one where the investment roles are much more focused on, let's say, manager selection? It's only once you have got this basic information that you can really think, what could I offer to this family office? If you're very specialized portfolio manager, you have your expertise in certain asset classes, but the family office doesn't manage them internally. Do you have enough expertise in manager selection to really offer something? So try to get this information first. What's the business model of this family office? And then think, what can you bring in from your expertise?
Do you see ESG as an important skill and expertise that's being sought in the market?
We see that as a topic everybody talks right now. I mean, it's ESG, it's sustainable investments. It's a topic you can use to start networking. I mean, if you have the impression that within a company ESG or also sustainability is a very important topic, ask them. How do you see develops? Talk to these people.
What I've seen over the last, let's say, 12 months, I would say it's just a perception, but I've seen really an increasing number of roles linked to sustainable investments, ESG, but also more and more to impact investing. So I think it's really an important trend. With a number of open positions on the market. The question is, maybe not in all cases, is it really a part of the main strategy of a financial service provider? Some do it more on a, let's say, in a superficial way, more for marketing reasons. Others really are convinced that this is one of the big trends in asset and portfolio management.
I see we're kind of running out of time, and there have been some other questions about starting out and things, but the one question maybe I'll end on, because you said how important continuing education is there one particular skill that if someone were to say, okay, I'm just going to take the most employment-friendly skill, what would you suggest?
I mean, we really support continuous training, continuous education. What I personally don't support is just doing some trainings to have the training. Also here, that's a question you need to ask your potential employer, your market you would like to be in. What's the education you have? What's the additional education you have? Ask the people. Because it depends in which area you are. I mean, with the basis of the CFA, you have a good ground, and then it depends where you would like to go to find the suitable education. Should it be just a training? Should it be a CAS? Whatever.
Very good. I think we'll have to draw a line there. There are still some questions, and perhaps you could reach out to Peter and Jörg if you have other questions that weren't answered. But I'd like to thank Peter and Jörg for an exceptionally interesting and timely presentation. I'd like to thank everyone who've been here and asking questions and participating. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.